Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today we're with Teana, co-founder of Venice AI. Discover how Venice AI ensures private, uncensored machine learning for everyone with open source models and decentralized computing. Remember, nothing stated here is financial advice. Welcome to the Building Web3 Podcast. Today, my good friend Teana. She's the co-founder and COO at Venice AI. Teana, before we get too deep into Venice AI, what was your come to crypto moment, and what were you doing before you got to Web3?
Well, thanks for having me, Jax. It's awesome to be here. So before I came to Web3, I was a transaction banker. Boo. So I like to say I'm a reformed banker. And I was working on blockchain solutions, mostly around kind of payments, trade finance, and financial inclusion type of activities. And excuse me, they weren't really going anywhere, and it became pretty frustrating. So during this period, I realized that the real true innovation around some of the blockchain projects that I was working on was actually the open source nature of blockchain, and those rails themselves and being able to transact in a permissionless way. So I decided to transition my career into crypto about 8 years ago. I've worked both on the commercial side with market leading exchanges like Binance and Crypto.com, leading their operations in Europe, as well as establishing a couple different trade bodies at the national level and the international level, working with industry and policymakers on developing regulatory frameworks for crypto. So that's kind of my background.
Absolutely. So a deep background in blockchain. So let's talk about Venice AI, what it is, what you guys are hoping to do there.
Yeah, sure. So really our mission is quite a simple one. We believe that anyone, anywhere should have access to the power of unadulterated, uncensored machine learning without being spied on. So our goal is to provide the magic and human advancement that generative AI enables, but within a privacy-first architecture. Using open source models, whose training you can, view. If you go onto Hugging Face, you can see how the models were trained, how different parameters have been weighted, and anybody can review those just like a blockchain. And we deliver that to our users through permissionless architecture using decentralized compute. So basically, we're private, uncensored, permissionless generative AI.
So before we get too deep into privacy and why this is necessary, let's talk about the current landscape. Like, are they spying on us when we're using ChatGPT or Bard or whatever the latest, proprietary LLM model is from Google or OpenAI?
Yeah, they are. So if you imagine a small group of tech companies that control most of the powerful machine learning that we have today and access to artificial intelligence systems that are used by billions of people worldwide. And these companies record all of your AI conversations, they commercialize your data, and they'll share it with governments if they demand to see it. And they have arbitrary and somewhat politicized content policies. So the result of that is that the AI models are trained to coddle you or redirect you or restrict you, redact the flow of information to you, and ultimately kind of influence your thinking based on what their view of the truth is. So through the control of this network of AI, they also have control of your data and are able to significantly influence and mold your thoughts and ideas without you even noticing. So you explain that to people and they think that that sounds like a dystopian, science fiction novel, but it's not. It's actually happening today, right now. So every time you put in a prompt into these major centralized models, you're essentially giving them this information about what you're thinking, about what you're searching for, about what you're learning, and all of the interaction back and forth from that AI, like you're creating images, etc. And all of that is attached to your identity forever. And that might not seem like a big deal today, but over the course of time, especially as we move toward AGI, you're going to have machines that know more about you and people that you don't know that know more about you than maybe you even know about yourself.
And just for people that are unfamiliar with AGI, what is AGI?
So that's like where the AI becomes sentient, right? It starts thinking for itself. So today, the models that we're working with are basically think of them as really large calculators that are able to compute information based on language. So they combine math and language, and they are built from a data set that is collected over various different ways. And when you're asking questions of ChatGPT or Venice, for example, it is accessing that model's knowledge and it's returning an answer to you. At some point in the future, we will have AI that will start to learn for itself and will start to develop its own knowledge based on its own experience, not necessarily referencing material.
All right, so now we understand, HEI. We understand what the current landscape of, we'll call it the spy on us from Google and OpenAI. Now let's talk a little bit about how Venice is, doing something different with this privacy first approach.
Sure. So essentially, as I said, Venice is private. It's uncensored. And so essentially what that means from a privacy architecture perspective is that your conversation history is only stored on your browser. So Venice doesn't store or log any of your prompts or any of the model's response to you on our servers. Your messages, the messages that you send, the AI are encrypted and sent directly through decentralized compute resources through a proxy server. And then the response from the AI is similarly streamed back to you through the encrypted proxy server to your browser. So it never persists anywhere outside other than your browser. And the GPUs that process your inference requests come from multiple different decentralized providers. And while each specific provider might be able to see the text of one specific conversation that you're having, but it will never see your entire history, and it doesn't know your identity. So that's really the kind of crux of the privacy element, as opposed to just sending all this information into a decentralized black box that's controlled by people.
So then let's talk about some of the key features. So if people are familiar with like a ChatGPT, there's image generation, there's obviously text generation, there's all kinds of different services. What have you guys built into Venice AI for people that have never, logged in? What would you say is like the life of or the experience using Venice?
Yeah, so it is a very similar experience to something like ChatGPT, except that having GPT as general purpose tools, different tools for different things, we have kind of an app that integrates most of the features that people use Gen AI for today. So for example, we have 3 chat models. We have a new data model that is an 8 billion parameter model, and it is connected to the internet. So in addition to what the model knows, what it's been trained to know, it also can access the web for up-to-date information for time-dependent type questions. And this model is really excellent for general task and conversation capabilities. Excuse me. And since we've connected it to the internet, people are actually using it quite a lot for search. And what I like about using this model instead of search is typically when you put a question into Google, what you get back is a list of possible answers or a list of sources that might provide you with the answer. If you put a search into or a question into Venice, into this web-enabled model, you will get the answer and you will get the sources cited to you where it got the answer. So that's pretty cool and it's way more efficient. Our second model is another version of the initial Llama 3 model. It's called Doggy. And it's another fine-tuned version of that base model, but it's a 70 billion parameter model, so it's much bigger. And while larger models have access to more data parameters, this also means that it takes them a little bit longer to run through those parameters to answer your question. But it can be more thorough, so that's a benefit. And then finally, last week, Meta published their latest open source model, their version 3.1. So Meta's really been leading the way in open source models. And they released a 405 billion parameter model. It's absolutely huge. And the largest open source model published to date. But what's really exciting about that model is that its performance against the centralized competitor closed models is extraordinary. And so I think what this really demonstrates is that open source models, once thought to be inferior, have now only become competitive, but across a number of metrics. 7 out of 15 of the metrics that are the most analyzed for LLMs, Meta outperforms the incumbents. So that's very cool. If anybody listening chooses to use it, please remember it's brand new. It was published last week. We added it to our platform the day it was published because we really wanted to get it in the hands of users, but it's still in beta. It's not connected to the internet. And it was published at the end of 2003, so there's a time delay. And it is still somewhat censored. So this is Meta's version of the model, but we expect over time that other open source developers will fine tune this model and will provide access to an uncensored version of it soon. So that's chat. Within chat, we also provide access to what are called system prompts. And most mainstream chat apps don't allow you to do this. We call it God mode. And it's basically a set of instructions that you provide to the model to elicit a specific response or behavior. Like you can tell it, only speak to me as if you're Stephen Hawking. And, it will adopt the accent. It will, speak to you in a very scientific, authoritative voice, etc. So the ability to customize system prompts also lets users kind of adapt and personalize their interactions with Venice to achieve really specific goals or personas. That's pretty unique. We also have a function for generating and writing code. Our developers have used Venice to help debug Venice, which I've always think is pretty cool. And then we offer image generation, which has a lot of features. So I won't go into all of them, but basically we offer 4 models. They're all quite different. Some are geared toward specific types of imagery, whether it be something like anime or caricatures. One is a general purpose model that is my favorite. It's called Playground. And it creates really awesome pictures of landscapes and epic type of imagery, great dogs. It also really handles animals well. And then in addition to those 4 different models, we have about 75 pre-programmed styles for each model as well. So if you're not an image prompting expert and you're looking for a specific style, like it might be film noir or anime or just a really photorealism type of image, you can choose that setting and create that image with a prompt that might not be as sophisticated as an AI artist might do. And you can generate those in a variety of different image sizes and orientations, and you can also generate them in high resolution images as well.
Absolutely. And you said there's multiple different models. So if somebody's never gone on to Venice, how do you help them understand which model they should be using or help them make an informed decision? Because with more choice becomes more responsibility on their part.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we get asked a lot, which model is better? So with a lot of these things, obviously we have, our FAQs and we write blogs a couple times a week and we highlight different features and how to create cool images. We link to a lot of our users' images. We reshare a lot of the information that users either send to us or post in different forums, taking users through kind of the steps that were taken to kind of get that really cool image. But honestly, it's really difficult to say which model is best. My co-founder and I, Eric, he really likes the Fluently model, which he believes has kind of really great aesthetics. It's designed to produce great lighting and contrast and really realistic people and nature. I prefer the Playground model. I think that it just, there's something about it that the images I just like them better than the Fluently model. But if you're doing any kind of graphic design or any type of animation, people really like the PixArt model. So there is no best model. We do default to a model and we change that default periodically. There's a model selector that you can just drop down. And I honestly just encourage people to play with that. We have thought about, choosing a model. When you go on ChatGPT, you get a model and you generate images. But we still think it's fun for people to be able to experiment and explore and learn. And equally, as part of, the open source community, the beauty of open source is that somebody takes a base model. So in most of these cases, people are using Stable Diffusion's 1.5 base model, and they're fine tuning it so that that model produces different types of imagery. And if you're not an AI expert and you're not going to go on Hugging Face and run some of these smaller models yourself, you won't have access to these things. So I think it's kind of cool that we let people explore and experiment.
Absolutely. And, a very common thing people are doing in like ChatGPT or other, we'll call these private LLMs, is they're training their own models or their own GPTs to do certain tasks. Is that functionality available within Venice where you can fine tune, say, like a copywriting, model?
You can't fine tune within Venice, but what you can do is quite a lot of bespoke tailoring to how the model responds to you with the system prompt. The system prompt is a really, really powerful tool. And we allow you to create multiple system prompts. And you can move between those. So, for example, let's say you were writing a novel and you wanted some help getting past, dialogue. Maybe you're kind of stuck. You can, I'm so sorry, I'm getting over COVID. You can tell the model that this character is Jax, and this is who he is, and this is how he thinks, and this is what he looks like, and this is how he's educated. They can be really long. And this is Teana, and this is who she is, and this is her background, and this is how much she thinks. And then ask the model to generate a dialogue between these two characters, and it will do that, and it's materially different. So there's quite a lot of functionality and possibility to curate and really create personas within Venice using those system prompts that doesn't necessarily exist within some of the centralized, kind of black box apps. And so then therefore they're creating them for you with those GPTs.
Got it. And you guys have experienced quite significant growth. Can you tell us what the adoption has been like for and the market reception to these decentralized AI tools?
Yeah, so we launched in May. So we have been live for a little over 2 months. A little over 2 months. And we've grown to, I think we have on average now, I want to say we've got 16 or 17,000 users as of today. Those are unique users, and they vary between our kind of three user types. So you can use Venice today for free without signing up. You could just go to venice.ai and you will get a screen and you can type in a prompt, or you can scroll up to the top and click. I think it's like try chat or something, or try Venice. And you can generate prompts, chat prompts, images, write code. There's, a limit, but you get a pretty decent limit of free usage every single day. And so some users that we have use it for free, and they kind of just stick under those limits. And then we have a free user option, which basically means you sign up and then you get more inference. And then we have a pro user option. And it's relatively inexpensive. It's considerably less than every other incumbent out there. And we've seen a significant increase in the amount of our pro users, probably more than half now. So yeah, we're really excited about the uptake. I think that one thing it's very important for us. Privacy is a critical element and one of our USPs, but we realize that not everybody will necessarily appreciate or feel as strongly about privacy as we do. But what we have found is that our users are mostly drawn to us because of the lack of censorship. And so when you look at how major AI companies implement these really strict content policies, and generally, I think with good intention, but ultimately these restrictions cause the AI systems to fail in delivering accurate and contextual information. And they ultimately make artificial intelligence less intelligent. And troublingly, that's if they indeed answer your question at all. I'm sure you and many of your listeners have had the experience of asking an AI platform a question, and it's deemed to be, or somebody has deemed it to be taboo or inappropriate, probably a person or a committee at that company. And the response that you get is that the AI just refuses to answer the question at all. What's problematic there is what's taboo, right? And so if you take this moment in time, 2024 is a year where more human beings on Earth will take part in a vote, a national vote, a regional election, than any other time in our history. And so when you limit access to things like information about candidates or their policy positions, that's really detrimental to the whole kind of democratic process, and to critical thinking. And it feels a little autocratic to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about some of the challenges you guys have faced while building Venice, and how you guys have worked to overcome there. Because obviously there's the censorship stuff. There's building in a decentralized nature, which is never particularly easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one. So I think a lot of startups, at some point there might be a pivot along the way, or there might be kind of a change in the thought process around what's the USP for the product itself. We are very steadfast in what our mission is, and every decision that we make is really kind of put through, three things. Does it aid privacy? Does it reduce censorship? And does it support open source decentralization? And so everything that we do, every decision that we make has to be supported by those three principles, or it's just not going to happen. So that means that it does limit our ability and our access to do things maybe the way that you're used to doing things. For example, we use Proton Mail. I think a lot of people are used to using Outlook or Google and all of the features that come with Outlook and Google. That is not a privacy first element that we could plug into our tech stack. And so we use a privacy first email. The decentralized compute that we use, it would be very easy to just run this service through an AWS server. But instead we choose service providers like Akash, for example, that only run decentralized compute, and you can only pay for your servers in Akash tokens. And so that does create a little bit of friction, which just means we need to be really considered about the decisions that we make, and execute them well.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of advice, given that you guys are building in this space, what kind of advice would you give to aspiring, founders looking to enter the AI, blockchain, decentralized space?
Well, I mean, this is, I have had this advice for people for a long time. I think the big challenge that we have in Web3 is ourselves. I think we overcomplicate things. And when you look at building a product that people want, need, and are attracted to, it has to be easy. You have to remove friction. You need to ensure that people will always choose the easiest option. That's just human nature. And so, my time in crypto has been spent trying to kind of distill very complex ideas for policymakers, for example, and to try and create products and services that are easy for people to adopt. And I think when you're talking about money, you're working almost kind of against the grain, because, we are raised to have this view of how we spend and save our money. And that's generally kind of distilled by our parents and our parents' parents. And so with money, you're asking people to kind of change their mindset and change their behavior. One of the great things about AI is that it's brand new. And so I'm really passionate about making sure that people understand what the options are. I still use ChatGPT for certain things. For other things, I would never use it. So optionality is great, removing friction and building things that people actually want to use. And once you do that, it's got to be easy. Our interface is very, very simple. You can use it without ever even, opening an account, because we just want to start to train people how to use it, feel comfortable using it, and not be scared to use AI because you do think you're being spied on.
And how do you envision Venice, contributing to the broader adoption of AI technologies? Is it this going to be the central hub for people to use decentralized AI models, or that this will be like the predominant privacy first model?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would love to be the predominant decentralized and privacy AI model. I think there are others that are working on very specific types of AI that are designed for persona interaction, for example. We are basically a general purpose generative AI tool. I think there will always be that kind of best in class, specialized, bespoke type of AI services for content creators, for example. If you're a music artist or you're a visual artist, you might want to have a whole bunch of features that are very nuanced, and really only kind of content creators would use those. But for your everyday person, this is an exceptional tool, and you never need to feel like you should be scared to use it. I think one of the things that we need to consider is that our interactions with AI can be deeply, deeply personal. So, for example, we share our thoughts and our questions and our ideas more intimately with AI than we do on social media, for example, right? Because you kind of feel like I'm talking to a machine. This isn't the polished Instagram version of ourselves. It's really kind of our raw, honest thinking and intellectual exploration. I like to use the analogy of imagining sharing your private journal or your diary on Facebook. Like, you wouldn't do that, right? That's a level of vulnerability that we're dealing with, though, when using AI without privacy safeguards. So, current centralized AI models censor the output according to the content policies that are kind of devised behind closed doors, right? We don't know what they're being influenced by, and these policies sometimes can seem arbitrary and opaque, which is the antithesis of kind of a decentralized ecosystem. And so, users believe that they're interacting with, true machine learning. Like I mentioned earlier, a calculator that's programmed to do statistical inference on language. But in reality, they're interacting with a model that's influenced by that company's proprietary partiality, or their political views, or their personal values. And the model is operating within this kind of ring-fenced guardrails that they've put in place. And really, at best, this leads to like silliness, like we saw early last year with Google's model only creating, Black Vikings, right? That was a really stark example. But, in the worst case, human bias adulterated AI can perpetuate all sorts of things like racism and sexism and silencing of dissenting opinions in public. So for us, truly open access to AI has to be uncensored, and it needs to be open. And when you look at kind of governments around the world, regulation is coming, and how that comes into place, I think, is going to be critical. And open source is basically under attack, right? There's a lot of proposals. Biden's executive order stipulates that AI license requirements for models over certain sizes restricts the number of parameters that are allowed. There's some discussion about being used for like dual, I forget how they say it, but basically like you need to get permission because it could be used as a weapon. I mean, it's nuts. So there's no question that politics will play a role in AI policy. And when you look at things like, Meta announced last week that they would not be releasing their new incredibly important model within Europe because of its draconian level regulation. And so how does that affect the people of Europe? How does that impact, not only AI, but the human ability to scale and grow and learn. So we are strong advocates and champions of open source development. We believe that open source AI evolves through really thoughtful iteration and experimentation, and ultimately, cannot be in the hands of, or shouldn't hinge on, political whims, right? It needs to be ungated, uncurated, and uncensored.
And for people that are unfamiliar with the European restrictions, talk a little bit about what's going on in Europe in terms of this, this attempt to curtail AI development. And then do you see in the future kind of like Web3 where there's essentially like a Singapore or Dubai would be more advanced and the US be a slightly more draconian, or how do you kind of see things shaping?
Yeah, I think it's really early to say. I have seen from a policy perspective, there's a slightly different risk appetite around AI than maybe previously we've seen from countries when it comes to crypto, right? A lot of countries have been really slow to figure out, how they're going to allow crypto in their country, where many countries around the world are really embracing AI and see the, opportunities, the possibilities. The Europeans, I say this a lot, one of these days it's going to get me in trouble, but Europe basically regulates as a national export. They regulate everything. that's just what they do. And so, like I'm based in the UK, and the UK, famously, we all know, left the European Union. And one of the reasons that drove that was the extraordinary amounts of regulation that European Parliament generates. So if you look at the development of the Market and Crypto Assets Act, MiCA, is the European framework for crypto. And depending on who you are, some people think it's okay, right? I mean, it's very prescriptive. And it is, very specific, but there is a way for crypto to operate in an authorized way in Europe. And I think that my true belief is that the specific MEPs who have been working on the AI Act, which has now passed, genuinely believed that they were creating a path for innovation in Europe. Clearly, that is not the view from the industry. So, if Meta, who, in my opinion, isn't necessarily fuck around and find out, right? But they'll roll the dice. Let's see how it goes. And if they're saying, no, we're not releasing any more models in Europe, then clearly there's a problem, right? I mean, clearly there is a problem if there is no way for them to feel comfortable bringing an open source model. And when we're talking about open source, we'll just reiterate again, you can go on Hugging Face and you can see exactly what's in that model, how it was trained, how it's been weighted, where the information came from. As opposed to OpenAI, like we don't know where they're scraping their data. They don't tell us. And, equally, when I create something on an open source model, it's mine. If you read the terms and conditions on some of the centralized platforms, you create an image, you have a conversation, you create, intellectual IP. It doesn't actually belong to you. So it just seems very backwards to me.
Yeah, there's a very funny quote, and I'll butcher it because I was trying to look it up really quickly. But it was essentially like the US created Google, Uber, Facebook, and the EU created GDPR.
Yeah, 100%. Yep. And I think that they also, I know, this is this approach to kind of punch above one's maybe kind of GDP or commercial way to set out standards early. I know this was the approach with crypto, and then everyone else will have to get in line, or everyone else will have to be compliant with them in the same way that the rest of the world has had to comply with GDPR to be able to transact with, European customers. And, I can tell you from talking with governments around the world that no one is, getting ready to rewrite their, regulatory proposals to align with MiCA, right? Yeah. So I think what's going to happen is that Europe is slowly going to start just creating this little cocoon. And, the extraordinary amount of talent that's in Europe. I mean, there's incredible, mathematic universities. Like Paris is one of the best in the world. Like, these people are going to get an incredible education and leave the continent because they're not going to be able to build anything. I think that's a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about some of the milestones and developments people can look forward to from Venice.
Yeah, people ask us that a lot, and it feels like we're doing a lot really fast. So I always think that question's funny. So we are looking at basically the bottom line is this. If you're a Venice user and you send us feedback, and it's like thoughtful, considered feedback around what we should be doing, what we should be working on, features you'd like to see, those come to me, those come to Eric. They go straight to the team, and we evaluate, how many people have a desire for this, and, how quickly can we get it done. So we're very user focused. And our short-term roadmap is really focused on meeting some of those customer requests. We have the ability, for example, to upload PDFs. So you can upload a PDF or a text file, and the AI can analyze it for you, and tell you what's in it, and it can pick out specific things if you're looking at a large document. But our users are trying to use it for even larger documents than we're equipped to handle at the moment. So that is one thing that we're actively working on now to improve that and just make that experience better. Other things that we've seen that are very cool in the market. I mean, there's a lot of ways to take imagery and add animation to imagery. Maybe not necessarily video, but 3D type elements are something our users have been asking for. And then I think, longer term, as we grow, obviously, we'll be looking at, potential partnerships with other decentralized companies and just how to create a bigger ecosystem for open source decentralized AI more fully. And just be a good community partner. So there are lots of things on the horizon, and we tend to roll out something new every couple of weeks. So hopefully we'll keep up that pace.
Perfect. And where can people keep in touch with you, keep in touch with what's going on in Venice, and see some of these roadmap items come to fruition?
Yeah. So if you go to our website, which is also the platform, it's venice.ai, and you can kick off from there. You can follow us on Twitter at Ask Venice, or LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. You can follow me at Teana Taylor. So it's Teana Taylor. And our co-founder, or our founder, is Eric Voorhees, and he's on Twitter at Eric Voorhees.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. And to everyone, interested in decentralized AI, go get involved with Venice. I'll put all of the links in the description. And thank you all for listening.